Today I want to talk to you about a very important topic. And this is a topic, again, having a tie into what's going on with China. And what's going on with China right now is there's lots of aspects that you need to comprehend because they're doing lots of different things. And it's important for us to understand what's going on because it will have a huge impact. And let me explain to you, first of all, what do I mean by this drill that escalating? What's going on? Well, you have to understand it's like a three-prong approach, right? So essentially, China is basically involved with, there's some war games. China is involved with energy. It's also involved with the US right now. And it's basically trying to decouple. That is the biggest thing they're trying to do because they don't want to be dependent. Now, we're not talking war. We're not talking anything like that. But we're talking really, which is much more important, it's about really trying to, this is not about war, but about interdependence. Essentially, what I mean by interdependence, China just basically wants to stay clear of the U.S. They don't want to invade. Now, of course, we are always at the mercy of an accident. That's the problem. Okay. So what's really going on here? Well, I'm telling you what's going on, and you need to know this. As far as what China is doing in terms of war games, it's part of it's a big plan, right? It's a multi-pronged approach, but obviously it's going to impact you. And I will tell you how it's going to impact you. Well, the first one, you should know that in April 25, what did they do? Well, China launched a major military exercise around Taiwan. Okay, they call it the Straight Thunder 25A. Basically, the drill spanned the Taiwan Strait, the South China Sea, the Philippine Sea. So they went around and around. They involved coordinated operation across land, sea, air. It's not like I didn't warn you. It's not like I didn't tell you. It's not like you did not know. Okay. So this was April, and they went around, coordinated operation across land. These exercises tested capabilities in the area of regulation, joint blockages, precision strikes. So they were quite busy. But then in June of 25, they did some naval drills beyond the second island chain. Now, the second island chain is really something that they usually don't go beyond. They use a Shandong aircraft carrier along with its task group. Taiwan interpreted this as a deliberate political signal of extended operational reach. The second island chain. The second island chain, my friends, that is a term that you should know. Second island chain, right? Basically, this is where, you don't really belong there anymore. Well, you really shouldn't be there. But frankly, they've been doing it. They've been going at it, and they've been going at it quite a bit. The second island chain is a strategic military geographical concept in the Pacific, often used in discussion about U.S.-China naval strategy and power projection. The second island chain is the second of three notional island chain. It is east, but anyway, what you should know, you really don't go beyond that. But China has been testing it. That was in April. Then in June, again, they are pushing, and they conducted takeoff and landing drill near the Bowen Island and southwestern maneuvers beyond the second island chain. Taiwan said, what are you guys doing? You're getting too close to where we are. Then, early August, China and Russia launched a joint C-2025, a joint naval exercise. Now, if you ever wanted to know why Trump is going to talk to Putin on August 15th, it is not about Ukraine. Nothing to do with that. He's going to be talking about more important things. He's going to be talking about what is of interest to the U.S. And when you know that China and Russia are launching a joint in August this year, this happened recently, a joint naval exercise in the Sea of Japan. The drill included submarine rescue, submarine warfare, air defense, missile operations. I want my subscribers to understand what's going on in the world. This is not a news channel. This is not about gossip. This is about, I want you to understand what the heck is going on. And all these things happening in front of you. They're not hiding it. It's just how you put the pieces together. Like right now, everyone is talking about Trump meeting with Putin, and they're saying, my God, he's going to give up the store. What is he doing? What is he talking to him? Putin is never going to agree to any of these things. And and Trump, is catering to Putin. You must not listen to all of these gossipy terms, right? Trump is not there to talk about Ukraine because at the end of the day, we know very well that Ukraine is not going to let Putin keep what he got. Ukraine wants him out completely, which is an impossibility. It's not going to happen if you know anything about Putin. So what's the point of meeting with the guy? The point of meeting with the guy is, remember, countries do not have friends or foes. They have interests. That you need to understand. And you should live your life that way as well. So what does that mean? Well, essentially, it means that he's going to meet Putin to say, okay, what's going on with everything that's going on with you and India and China and and how can we work together here? Because obviously we're not. In August, China and Russia basically did some joint exercises. The drills included submarine rescue, anti-submarine warfare, air defense, missile operations, demonstrating deeper military cooperation amid global tensions. Now, we're not saying that everybody's going to invade anyone. Nobody's going to invade the U.S. That's not what you should be concerned about. What you should be concerned about is what happens if these people start working so well together they don't need the U.S. That is what you need to be worried about. How much are you willing to spend for antibiotics? Because they all come from China. Okay. Then it's not over. Late February, early March, there was a Chinese task that conducted live fire drills in the Tasman Sea. The operation disrupted commercial flight, raised alarm among Australia, New Zealand. See, what are you doing? We have planes flying around, and you're doing live fires? Then, in early 25, China tested an amphibious assault barge which formed temporary causes over waterway. Analysts believe this barge enhances China amphibious landing. This is all in 25 alone. Lots of activities here. Now, of course, question is this. What is China worrying about? Well, basically what China is doing under U.S. pressure, I guess, it depends which one you want to look at this. They're doing it because they're building, it's literally a term, they're building an economic fortress. The same way the U.S. is trying to build Fortress America, China is building a fortress, an economic fortress. Did you know? And this is big news as well. It came out not too long ago. Do you know that China is actually building an engineering marvel? It's building its $167 billion power project that will allow it to be more energy sufficient. Because right now what's happening is China is highly dependent on other countries for its energy. So what does it mean for you, right? What do I care about all this? Well, what you care about is that as China is slowly decoupling, protecting itself as well with those things behind me, right? But it's slowly decoupling from the world. Not so much that it wants to invade the world. It realizes that people have too many weapons. That's not going to happen. But it is starting to decouple. And eventually it won't need U.S. And what is the U.S. trying to do? The U.S. is trying to stay relevant. Although you need to know that the U.S. is extremely reliant on China. Okay? 80% of pharmaceutical ingredients come from China. So there's a heavy dependence, a heavy reliance on China for pharmaceutical item, for rare earth mineral, 70 to 80%. What has happened, I think, is as long as they thought, and I guess you could blame it on the new administration, but I guess China thought, as long as you keep sending me, the money, I'll give you products, I'll learn how to make these things better. And frankly, I think that this keep on going. The thing with the new administration, they say, no, this stops here. We know what you're doing, right? We know what you're doing. And we are trying to stop you. Okay, so therefore, whatever pressure we can, we're going to So what that does to China basically says, oh my God, we got to do even faster. We cannot wait. For example, amazingly enough, they are also building the number one shipbuilder in the world. So you should know that the U.S., for example, in terms of its ability, in terms of its capacity in shipbuilding share. China has 54% of steel production share and 45% of global shipbuilding share. 45% of the ship being built come from China. Do you want to know how much? Do you want to know the number from the US? Less than 1%. So let's be real here. When we hear that the US is a big country, we could do all this, know the facts and be humble. Okay. Global share of manufacturing. Global share. 30% for China. 17% for the United States. Industrial output, 6.5 trillion in China, 3.5 trillion in the United States. Labor force in manufacturing, 10 times more, 100 million in China, 12 million in the United States. That means that China at some point will not need the US for anything. It will close its border, it will take in China, it will take in Russia, it will take in India, and they will close the circle, and they won't need the US. Why do you think? And this is why you need to read beyond the news, because it will impact you at some point, right? Why do you think the administration, not just this one, the previous one, not to the same extent, this one is really moving fast, but what do they think they're trying to get in there? Basically what the administration right now is trying to get in the middle of all these people, these three people, and trying to get inside China. But it's impossible because they know what they're doing. It's basically based on interest, this interest. They're looking for interests. So China is basically saying, you know what? I don't need you for this. I don't need you for that. I'm protected. I still need you for energy, unfortunately, but I'm going to build a dam, a humongous. It's a monster they call it an engineering marvel. And of course, they're building it in an area that's upsetting India, right? Because, imagine, it's hydropower they're going to build in the Tibetan plateau, which is, they don't really care about whatever. It's dramatic example of China determination to become self-reliant. That is an actual term. What do I mean? China is girding for an AI battle with the US and is trying to become self-reliant more and more. If I know this, they know that too. Marco Rubio knows this. Marco Rubio, everybody gets up in the morning and saying, okay, what do we do now? Because they're getting farther and farther away, and we're becoming more and more reliant. US relies on China for 80% of its pharmaceutical. Kebar says Chinese steel is trash can. My friend, that might be the case, but they've got most of the production. The US is relying on 80% of rare earth minerals. So you could imagine what kind of conversation you could have with someone. And obviously, they postponed the discussion again for 90 days. Obviously, the US didn't do with China like they did with India. You know what? I can't talk to you. You're not answering to me? 50%. Brazil, I don't like what you're doing with this former president? 50%. Switzerland, you know what? I don't even want to see you. Don't even come around. 39%. China, all right, let's talk. You know what? Let's postpone the discussion. Let's talk some more. Russia, can we all get along? How come can we just have a discussion here? Right? No, forget Ukraine. I want to know, can we work together? Can I keep you apart away from China, even though you've done drills? At the end of the day, I'm concerned that ship has sailed, right? I think it's just a matter of time before they close the door. Now, China still relies on the US right now, okay? And you could see, for example, there was this huge news about the fact that China is basically saying the AI chips that we're getting from NVIDIA, I don't know, this is not so good. There's some issues with it. Obviously, NVIDIA is not sending them the most advanced chips. And this was actually started with Biden started this, actually. And so what we're having right now is we have the making of a potential disaster on our hands. The potential disaster that's happening before our very eye. And again, you have to be careful when you hear, the war games, the planes, trains, automobiles, all these things flying in the air. There's going to be a war. No, that's not where you should be looking. There's not going to be a war, Lyle, because nobody wins. What's happening, and this is where you need to look, is the slow decoupling. You want to make sure that we don't need the US, and maybe between China and Russia and India, you know what? We're fine. And the reason you could see this is happening, quite frankly, I wouldn't say it's obvious, but what you're seeing it's happening is basically they're not responding to the US. They're not answering. Do you think, let me ask you that, China is decoupling from the US? Okay, let's ask that question first. Let's get some thoughts in our minds in the morning, because obviously if this is happening, right? Because if this is happening, then this is going to have a huge impact on you. Well, because you're going to run out of medicine, you're going to run out of steel, you're going to run out of many things. Now, and obviously the administration is running out of time and they're trying to run as fast as they can. But is there going to be enough time? This is big news. Now, of course, the way the news is being reported to you, you're being shown an administration that China Navy is like Tinker Toys. Cookie Mondo. How large is the China Navy versus the US? I think what it is, they have two large of those aircraft carriers, which is something that China, my friends, has between 370 to 400 warships. And it's growing faster. The largest navy globally by ship count, though there are many smaller classes. The US has about 290 to 300. Maybe that would have been the case in the past, but the United States maintains a substantial advantage in displacement tonnage, especially due to its large aircraft carriers. But in terms of missile capacity, the U.S. leads with over 9,900 cells versus 4,200 with China. However, projections indicate that they will surpass the U.S. by 27. No, it's not about numbers, it's about quality. No, the U.S. still has a quality, okay, but it's losing ground, okay? The U.S. has 11 nuclear-powered subcarriers, okay? China only has 3. The U.S. has 66 nuclear submarines. China around 12. But China is the number one. No, you shouldn't be scared. There's nothing to be scared about the weaponry that they have, because they're not going to fight. That is not going to happen. I mean, come on. You don't need 66 submarines. You only need one, right? And you have one good warhead, and that's all you need. That is not what you need to worry about. What you need to worry about is that at some point they close the door and they don't need you, and they're not scared of you, and we are done. Why do you think that is? Think ahead, right? So basically, I am closing my doors. I don't need you anymore. Okay? When we say I don't need you anymore, but the U.S. is nowhere near that stage. So what do I mean by that? I'm basically saying that the U.S. relies on China. So tomorrow, when I say tomorrow, we're talking 5 to 7 years, earlier on some of these instances, but basically 90% of your pharmaceutical items come from China, 100% of antibiotics, most of vitamin C, ibuprofen, all that. All this comes from China. The batteries come from China. The circuit boards, 50%. Rare earth, 90%, right? So let's say tomorrow, when I mean tomorrow, I'm talking a couple of years from now, because let's literally how many years you're left before this becomes an issue. They close the door, or they close the door in a way that basically, you know what? We are not we're going to charge you more. We're going to demand more, and you're not going to be willing to do. What do you do as a U.S.? Your people are going to say, well, where's my stuff? I need my stuff, right? Cookie's going to be calling and he's going to say, where's my antibiotics? Where's my vitamin C? Now that Trump will be gone, there'll be some other guy or woman, and say, well, do it. And that, my friend, is when the U.S. could actually start something, right? The U.S. could actually, don't forget, the U.S. started a few things recently. Bombed Iran, right? I mean, there's reasons behind it. I'm not saying they did it for the sake of it, but the point is started a war with another country, and for which they had not been attacked, right? So, and I'm attacking Iran because I think they have an atomic bomb and they're going to do something to Israel, or whatever the reason is. The U.S. will actually start something with China, and that's where China said, well, be careful. Because now I got just as many aircraft carriers as you. I got just as many missiles, blah. So don't do it. And they know that too. The U.S. knows that because these people think 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. So because they know that, what do you think they're going to do? They say, well, we got to get something going now. Now we have to happen. It needs to happen now. And what I mean by now is this idea that the U.S. is essentially running out of time, right? What do we mean by the U.S. is the clock is ticking for the U.S.? Well, basically, within the next 5 to 7 years, semiconductors, you're going to lose that race. EV component, battery supply chain, you're going to lose that race. And you know what it is? People don't like to hear what's happening. They want to be told what they want to know. Now, obviously, and you should not want to just hear what makes you comfortable, because then you just go to switch one channel if you're one way, you switch to another channel if you're the other way, and you never know what's going on. Someone has to make the raw medicine. Where does it come from? What do you think? Okay. Now, having said that, we should say that the U.S. leads in R&D and biotech innovation, right? We come up with the medication, and you come up with the U.S. still as a lead on that. But I will tell you that in terms of biotech, I know that the Chinese are doing some great. They're discovering more molecules than the U.S. And they're not just there to make the cheap medicine. They are coming up with new medicine themselves, right? China accounts for approximately of 30% of global drug development, not making, development, while the U.S. covers around 48%. It's not 5% to 48%, it's 30%. China has surpassed the U.S. in the number of clinical trials conducted, signaling its growing prominence in life and science. So do you see what's happening, right? I'm building my army. That's working out pretty good. Building my health and science. That's also moving faster. I'm going to build my energy independence. All you need now really is a bunch of customers. Now, right now, you're getting your customers from the U.S. because it's a large market. So, if we were to say, well, what does China needs from the U.S. then? Well, in terms of advanced technology, China needs, semiconductor equipment. Essential for chip fabrication. They need the software. For example, Cadence software, requires design all modern chips. In fact, Cadence, there's a big story on that, where the CEO of Cadence actually is now the CEO of Intel. And yesterday, interestingly enough. So why can't we make it here? Well, that's the thing. Make it here. Well, it's cheaper to make it over there. The U.S. think about what needs to be done, and then they make it over there. And that's what's happening. It's being made over there. And as they're making it over there, they're learning, and they make their own. And that's the idea of, we gotta, there is this letter, those letters that went out to 17 different pharmaceutical companies that basically say, hey, wait a second here. You're charging too much for the products in the U.S. It's 10 times cheaper overseas. Well, the reason it's cheaper overseas because we're charging the consumer in the U.S. more so that we can in turn do research. But 10 times, really? Now, China relies on the U.S. Semiconductor equipment, EDI software, high-end GPUs like NVIDIA, which they're complaining, right? It's crucial for your development large language models. And in fact, China is saying, wait a second. Yeah, but what you're shipping us, this new thing that you're shipping us is not that great, right? It's not the greatest. In fact, it's spying on us. They have a whole slew of issue happening right now with NVIDIA and its chips. Quantum computing parts, aerospace components. Okay, so we need these things. But Cadence, by the way, like I said before, the former CEO is now the CEO of Intel, a U.S.-American guy born in Malaysia, I believe. And Trump says he doesn't trust him. He wants him out. Pressure, a huge amount of pressure. But more importantly, what they want is you want access to the U.S. consumer market. China export 15% to the U.S. They still need the U.S. But at some point, what's going to happen, they're going to say, okay, you know what, we don't need you anymore for anything else. As far as the consumer is concerned, we're going to be selling to Russia and India and all these other countries all around us. And then next door. So what do I need the American consumer for? And then the U.S. consumer is going to be stuck on its own. And then the U.S. government is going to say, well, we ran out of time. We need medication. We need all these things. If you don't give it to us, then we have to come and get it. We have no choice anyway, right? We won't have choice. We have to eat. We have to survive. And we have weapons, so we're going to go and get it ourselves, right? That's a concern everyone has. And that's something you should be concerned about, because at some point, these guys are going to go to the next level. Now, when is the next level? We'll see. Right now, everyone is concerned about, Trump, the U.S. administration, and these guys to go and visit Putin to talk about Ukraine. It's not about Ukraine. No, there's bigger effects. Pat, that someone has to make the raw material for the medicine. Where does it come from? It comes from, they import it from China, they import it from India, they import it from all these places, and they make it over there. Let's see. Yeah, that's right. 73%. China is decoupling from the U.S. So if you know this, right? Bunch of people online, well, not a bunch, my subscribers. If you know that, the administration knows that as well. So what do you think they're doing? They say, well, we got to do something, and we have to do it quick. Now, obviously, for you, the advantage is you have to think, well, how can I benefit from that knowledge, right? How do I benefit from that knowledge? Well, the first thing you're going to benefit from is rare earth minerals, right? How? Well, since there's going to be a strong push for rare earth minerals, and we have a few companies in the U.S. that actually do it, rare earth minerals in the U.S. And let me give you the companies, because obviously the stock is going to move and has moved a lot in the U.S. because one of them actually, the U.S. took a piece of it. That's important. Right? So if I'm looking at rare earth mineral stocks, you have MP Material Corporation, and that stock is up in the past month 52%. So that's how I'm helping you here, providing valuable information. Then you have USA Rare Earth Inc. It's up 57%. You have a bunch of companies. You also have Idaho Chemical. IDR, which I recommended on my Patreon channel. Right? Well, they're all at 50%. So the thing is, you don't want to be a victim and you don't want to panic. And who told me? Cookie said, well, I'm not scared. No, you shouldn't be scared. No, we're talking, we're sharing information, and then we say, well, how do I take advantage of it? Well, the way you take advantage of it is, first of all, you take a look at rare earth mineral stocks. Right? Take a look at them, study them, make sure that you don't pay too much for them because they're already up 50%. And if there's a bit of a decline in the stock, boom, you buy. Second, what else is going on? Well, we're talking about the fact that the U.S. needs to change its whole defense infrastructure. And don't forget, without the rare earth mineral, it's tough to make a lot of things that these companies are trying to make. So they're scrounging for information. They're scrounging for data. They're scrounging for rare earth minerals. I'm talking about the defense contractors, the defense company. But then that's ultimately, there's going to be, how'd you get to the rare earth mineral? You need to dig. You talk about infrastructure spending in the U.S. You're going to develop some roads to get to so you're talking about like VMC, Vulcan Materials, number one infrastructure in the U.S. That needs to happen at some point. So there's many ways you could take advantage of it, but also many ways for you to make sure that you don't, you don't panic. And then you understand what these guys are doing. What else is going on? Well, there's a lot. So basically what we're saying is recently China had a $16 billion merger of two state-controlled shipbuilders in China. And that's going to be completed this week, creating the world's biggest shipbuilder. Don't forget, China has 49% of the shipbuilding capacity in the world, right? While the U.S. searches for a path back into the business, less than 1%. America's shipbuilders are playing catch-up after decades of maritime industry decline. So the new administration has an ambitious plan to revive American shipbuilding. That's what they're doing. They're doing exactly what we're doing right now. They're saying, okay, what's going on and what do we need to do about it? That's what they're doing. That's exactly what it is. And some of them obviously are taking advantage of the situation, but that's how it is. That the American shipbuildings have hit a snags recently. In a shorter term, the administration threat to impose higher tariffs on ships made in China is giving South Korean and Japanese rival an opening to win back market share. That's how I use the tariffs. Soon, I think the administration is putting 100% tariffs on semiconductors. That is huge. But why? Because you only want to buy from certain people. China has begun the construction of a giant hydropower project at the earthquake-prone edge of the Tibetan Plateau. A spectacular engineering feat that is central to Beijing. That basically Beijing wants to be self-reliant. Beijing wants to be self-reliant. Now, when we say playing catch up, okay, Chinese ships, so that you understand, are basically carrying American cargo. That's exactly what's happening right now. They're carrying American cargo. They are decoupling, and most of you are aware of it already. 73% of you are saying, yeah, that's true, they're decoupling. Okay. In 2002, like China's shipyards production was just 8% of global commercial tonnage. Now it is number one. Last year, Chinese shipyard delivered 53% of global tonnage. With so many goods in the U.S. imported from overseas, that means Chinese-made ships are essential to keeping America store shelves well stocked. Well, you're going to say, well, how did we get there? Well, it's not necessarily a bad thing because you can't make everything. Well, the China wants to make everything. It's not a bad thing. What it is, it's just the fact that, well, I thought we could all get along. But remember, countries do not have friends, they have interests. And it's their interest to do these things. And the U.S. has been asleep at the wheel and is slowly losing control. Now, of course, these things cannot be done like that. You're going to need to do something. You're going to need to move the ship around. You're going to need to basically realize what's happening and undertake, and that's what they're doing with the tariffs. Hopefully it works. Now, the only thing with the tariffs, while it does shake the world and people are lining up basically to make sure they're on the U.S. good side because they don't want to lose that 25% GDP, because the U.S. is about 25% GDP of the world. What happens when that goes away? What happens when the U.S. is slowly going to be losing its control, its power, its influence? And that's why you're seeing, the way I'm seeing the quote-unquote activity that people are basically, I mean, it depends who you're talking to, obviously, that this is ridiculous, being a bully, you're doing all these horrible things. Well, maybe what you should see is a country that is running out of time and is panicking, and the clock is ticking and they need to move fast. The only thing is how fast is fast enough? Because now by using the tariffs, unfortunately, at some point, you might be moving the whole inflation back into play. Although today, I have to tell you, it's good news. The CPI report came out today, the inflation report, and basically it says that, you know what? It's holding steady at 2.7% inflation. So inflation is under control. So that's great. We don't have I'm not going to say we don't have an inflation problem, but it's doing just fine. Inflation is under control right now. And the reason it is, and don't forget, the next meeting is going to be sometime in late August. Hey, Mark, how are you? The latest consumer price report was good enough for investors, providing a lift for U.S. stocks, right? So inflation seems to be the way you want it, right? Inflation seems to be under control, at least for the time being. How long is it going to be under control? That's the biggest question that everyone has, that's what everybody's thinking. How long is that going to last, right? Well, I will tell you, as far as inflation is concerned, it basically says that the latest consumer price report was good enough. Excluding volatile food and energy costs, inflation accelerated at 3.1%. So the core inflation was at 3.1% versus 2.9% the previous month. But inflation overall consumer prices rose 2.7%, a little below the consensus forecast. So that means that now you don't need to worry about it. You know what? What's going to happen? Well, what's going to happen is in August, when the Fed meets, the good news is that they're going to lower rates. So this is how you use that information. When you're looking at, if you want to borrow money and you want to, buy a car, whatever, now is the time to do it because rates are going to be lower. And on top of that, with the lower rates, that's going to push stock prices even further up. So combine what I told you before about the rare earth stocks, the fact that we're going to have low inflation numbers, now is the time to buy. But be careful. Whenever you buy a stock, you want to buy a stock that is not overvalued. Meaning you need to take a look at the P ratio and say where we are with this. Is this a lot or is this not enough? Now, you got to be careful, right? But at the end of the day, that's what you want. You don't want to spend too much money. And you want to buy stocks that are cheap. And how do I know a stock is cheap? Well, you basically take a look at the P ratio. The P ratio right now is around 25, and it's high. Historically, is around 17. But inflation is under control. Rates are going to go lower. The economy is doing fine. Then you should take advantage of it. Now, don't overly concern yourself. Oh my God, the war games and China. Well, no, you need to be aware of it, and you need to follow it. You need to see what's happening. You need to develop a feel for these things and say, okay, this is what they're going to do. Pat, good information. Yeah, it's important to be informed. It's important to understand. But it depends where you get your information from, right? Where are you going to get your information from? Well, let me go on to these big networks that follow the market all day long. I mean, look at these guys that trade all day long. First of all, you need to understand one thing, that you cannot predict the stock market. You can't, right? So then what do? What you need to worry about, and this is what this channel is about, you need to worry about the black swan. You need to worry about what's going to happen next that's going to impact you in a negative way. That is definitely going to happen. And when you look at the situation with the war games, people getting ready, the decoupling that we're seeing, what do you think that means ultimately, right? Speaking of inflation, let me ask you a question. Do you think that goods are getting more expensive? And then I'll tell you why I'm asking these questions. Okay. And let's see if you yourself, where you are feeling the inflation that everyone is saying it's not here, right? And Trump will say, but didn't I tell you this was not going to happen? I said, well, the people in the know said that tariffs cause inflation. So where is it? Some people are actually waiting for inflation so they could say, you see, I told you this was good. My God, we're in trouble. Now, keep in mind, right, that when you're talking about inflation, right, how does inflation in the U.S. compares with other countries? Let's put everything into perspective. Okay. So headline inflation, 2.7%. Because it depends who you're listening to tells you, they'll say, well, it's 2.7%, but wait, it's going to get higher. You'll see it's going to get a lot worse, okay? The OECD average is around 4%, well above U.S. levels. These are the developed countries. Eurozone, inflation is about 1.9%. Global average is around 4%. The global average of inflation, the entire world of inflation is 4%. The US, 2.7. So GOB says we need to continue to export our industry and jobs abroad. Having to do even the slightest amount of extra expense for the greater good of my country is unacceptable. Tiniest amount of extra expense for the greater good of my country. We need to continue to export our industry and jobs abroad, and having to do even the tiniest amount of extra expense. Well, believe it or not, bringing it all back to the U.S. is going to create inflation, right? Because no one is going to make a car for $10 an hour. No one is going to make all the things that are made overseas for cheaper. It's going to be more money. But then obviously keep in mind that if it costs more money to make it, you're going to make more money. So if you're going to make more money, you know what I mean? So because they'll tell you, well, I mean, that's not good because now everything is going to cost more money. Well, maybe now the person that is building the car for you in the U.S. can now finally afford to buy the car, right? Because these people making cars for us overseas, they can't afford the car. And that's what is being made overseas. But a car is one thing. But when you're talking about pharmaceutical item, when you're talking about rare earth minerals, when you're talking about ships and in all these things, if they made over there and you don't see them, that's going to be a problem. I do appreciate you actually talking about investing. Well, at the end of the day, right, it's all about investing, but investing is not stock picking, right? We're not looking for the next NVIDIA. You're never going to find it. You're not. Then it's just pure luck, right? What this channel is, which is the black swan, right? And what the heck is a black swan? Well, a black swan is this, right? This is a black swan, right? A black swan looks like that. And we're looking for it. We're looking sarcasm. I do appreciate you actually talking about investing. No, but it is about investing. This is about, no, it's not racist. Empress, what are you talking about? Because it's a black swan? No, this is actually from a book. This is a book called The Black Swan. Well, at least maybe I educate you a little bit. This is part of this channel. It's like that. It's about that. A Black Swan is written by a book written by Taleb Nassim, right? And basically, it's a concept, right? That where can I find a black swan? Does this creature actually exist, right? And this is an important point tied to the investment community. This term was popularized by Taleb Nassim in his 2007 book, The Black Swan. Now remember, 2007 was a year. Taleb Nassim wrote, let's see if I could elevate the conversation here. Maybe you could stay with me here. So 2007, Taleb Nassim wrote this book called The Black Swan. And basically, it's not just a black swan, it's a black swan, the impact of the highly improbable. Like things you say would never happen, right? Historically, Europeans assumed all swans were white until they discovered some in Australia in the 17th century. So basically, the metaphor is that a single observation can overturn long-term beliefs. A black swan, that doesn't exist. Well, it does exist. And that's the thing, the rarity, the extreme impact, the retrospective predictability. And the reason he became very famous book is because he wrote it in 2007, a year before the financial crisis. You know, in 2007, I don't know if you were there, remember, everybody had a great time. Housing prices were up. I mean, how bad could it get, right? Okay. And so they said that the 2008 financial crisis was a black swan. The fall of the Soviet Union was a black swan. COVID was a black swan. We're looking for the next one here because you want to be the one that knows. Now, having said that, I will tell you that, the financial crisis, you say, well, nobody knows about it. No, some people knew. Take a look into Michael Burry knew about the fact that the financial crisis was coming. And what did he do? He hedged his bet, and this is where we talk about financial and stock market. He hedged his bet, bought a huge amount of he bought a huge amount of credit default swaps against the industry, and he made about $600 million. Taleb Nassim himself, with probably because he's part of a hedge fund that's based in Connecticut, called with Universa. They made 4,000% during COVID. How? Because they hedged themselves. This is what I'm trying to do with this channel. I want to expose to the many aspects that could potentially go wrong. We're talking, we're going over the economy. We're going the stock market, which is very expensive. We're going over the dollar, the tariffs, Powell, Israel, China, today's topic, inflation, Russia, believe it or not, Ghislaine Maxwell as well. South gas definitely went down to the oil, but it's climbing. Getting wealthy from the stock takes time. Looking for a quick fix might happen, but Mr. Super Pag. You don't unless you take all your money and you say, tomorrow's going to be a huge market crash, and you buy a bunch of options, put options, which is basically but then it's impossible. Okay. What you want to do is you want to know and understand. But then again, all the wealth, I realize that all the information I'm giving you, you're not going to grasp everything and remember everything and understand everything because I don't understand and I'm learning with you, right? This is impossible. The thing is, you want to be informed a little bit at a time, understand what's happening, get a feel, because you could decide, maybe rare earth mineral stocks could be of interest. Maybe I should be careful. Stock market is pretty high right now. Maybe I should do something else. Or it could be even in terms of jobs. Look what's up. I'm going to do a topic of we should talk about AI, really. And again, just want to remind you that for AI, even in AI, as you know, we're talking about ChatGPT, for example, and all these things. But realize that I believe that in terms of AI, US, it is ahead, but China is catching up very quickly, and they are hungry for more and more chips, and they're a little upset that they're getting the cheaper version of NVIDIA. They want the better version. They want to get the version that's going to put them ahead. For example, in terms of market share, right, in AI, this is going to follow this one. It's very interesting. ChatGPT has about 82% of the market. DeepSeek, 1.59%. Chinese. All right. But launched in early 25, DeepSeek has rapidly scaled, achieving 33 million in January, spiking to 100 million in April, a massive 186%. And its user base is in China, India, and Indonesia, accounting for 51% of its users. So even for that, China is catching up very fast, very fast. Mostly better. There is interesting tech using salt and everyday metals as battery material. Yes, rare minerals right now, correct. But the rare minerals, unfortunately, what's happening with the rare mineral is 80% is being done is mined in China. 80%. Let me see if I could get you that. But it's like most of the rare earth mineral is mined out of China, not in the U.S. They have almost 80% of the global capacity. And that is way too much, right? Let's put it this way. China export of rare earth mineral magnets to the U.S. is particularly continued to fall sharply in June, dropping 52% from a year earlier. In May, it dropped 93%. So it still has fallen. So China is He said, I am not so sure I want to give you all of this. So if you're not going to get the rare earth mineral from China, you're going to have to get it from the US. Therefore, any company that's involved with rare earth mineral, you should buy, as long as it's not too expensive. Take a look at the PE ratio. Let's take a look, for example, at IDR, I believe, right? IDR, for example. Idaho Strategic Resources is up about $23. That's a rare earth. It's gold and rare earth mineral. Stock is up. Sales are up 13 million to 25. Earnings per share is up. And what's the PE ratio on this thing? The PE ratio on the stock is 36. So it's above 24. So it's getting ahead. So anyway, so that's why I wanted to address today. And I'll be back this afternoon with some more salient information. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to take a look at everything that's going on. And I shall be back.